But yeah, I'm super excited. Heads up as well, I always recommend leaving a little bit of each whiskey in the glass if you can, just so you can go back to it. We are, of course, starting with the Deanston 1991 28-year-old because it is the most, easing us into the tasting. And you're definitely going to want to come back to that a little bit later. It's really quite special. So without further ado, I'd absolutely love to introduce Julieann Fernandez, the master blender for Bunnahabhain, Deanston, Tobermory, the group, all the things, who makes the whiskey that we're tasting today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's lovely to be here. This is the first time I've actually done a tasting with this group, so I'm really looking forward to it. And you've picked some really, really special and interesting drams, so I'm really looking forward to going through these. There's a couple that I've not tasted in the last year or so, so it'll be nice to go back and revisit them. So yeah, we'll just kick off and get into it.
Yeah.
Firstly, I'm very conscious that I have quite a strong Scottish accent. So if at any point I am talking too fast or I use words that you just absolutely do not understand, I will not be offended if anybody either puts their hands up or puts it in the chat to ask me what I'm talking about. I get it all the time, so don't worry, you're not being rude. But yeah, listen, let's get right into the drams. So please stick your nose into this, have a nose, have a taste as I'm talking through it. I'm going to just give you a very, very brief history of this whiskey and a little bit about Deanston. So this particular Deanston expression, it's at 45% ABV. So we like to keep a lot of our whiskies either cask strength or nominated strength. And this just allows you to taste it exactly as I'm tasting it when it's coming out of the cask, full of flavour and really, really rich. So this one was distilled in October of 1991, and then it was transferred into the muscat casks in June 2016. We do try and transfer into a lot of our finishing casks in the summer, or I do anyway, just because I like to kid myself that Scotland's going to get a nice summer and it'll help with the maturation. Now, 99% of the time, that's not the case, but in my dream world, Scotland would get a bit of sunshine, and in the summer it would really boost that maturation and boost the influence that the finishing casks are going to have on the whiskey. It's really important for me that when we're using finishing casks like muscat and things, that we don't overpower the wonderful flavours that are already in the Deanston new make spirit. So that's why our finishes they're obviously varied. We put them into cask and we'll check them after about 2 years, and then every few months after that. So this one was just over 4 years that we finished it for in the muscat casks. And for me, it's just absolutely phenomenal. The colour on it is beautiful. Really sweet, perfumey note to start. And then what I love about this is the fruity notes that you get. So I get kind of fresh peach and apricot. It's almost like, if you know the children's yogurts I'm talking about, it's like peach and apricot yogurts. That's what I get coming through, because it's fruity and it's creamy at the same time. Really full-bodied on the palate. And what I love about this is the mouth coating. So it kind of ties back to what I said there about almost being reminiscent of that yogurt, or almost of a kind of fruit crumble that you've poured cream over, something like that. It really coats your palate. And that's because obviously we don't chill filter. So we've got all of those lovely oils still in the whiskey. So for me, it almost creates like a kind of 3D experience. You're not just getting it on the nose and the palate and then it disappears. It really coats everything and it lasts and it lingers. So yeah, for anybody who's not been to Deanston Distillery, it's quite unique. So it dates all the way back to 1785 when it actually opened as a cotton mill, and then the cotton industry was booming. We employed over 1,500 people, and they formed a little village in the town of Deanston. They had their own currency called Deanstonians. So if you look at a lot of our bottles, on the top of the Deanston bottle at the cork, it actually has the print of what the coin was, the Deanstonian coin that we paid the people that worked in the cotton mill with. So yeah, thriving community, but then obviously the cotton mill had to close down. So it closed down in 1965, and that's when it found a new life as Deanston Distillery and started producing whiskey in 1966. So in terms of distilleries, it is actually quite new, and that's what I love about Deanston. We're obviously going to go on to Bunnahabhain a little bit later on, which is very old and traditional. But with Deanston being that little bit younger, it means that I can be quite expressive with what I do. So one, it's a very adaptable spirit. It has this beautiful waxy character. So that comes from, we have a really kind of fruity note that comes through after fermentation. So if you start with a fruity wort, when that gets distilled, and we've got huge big stills that create a lot of reflux, it gives you this wonderful waxy character. And for me, that just means Deanston's really adaptable. So it lends itself so well to lots of different casks, whether it's Oloroso, something more unique like tequila. And as you can see, it's worked really well with this muscat cask.
Mm. So I think Owen's question, where were the muscat casks sourced from, is a really great one. Where do you guys get a lot of the casks from? Because especially with Deanston, we see some really, really cool barrel aging and finishing.
Yeah, we do. So traditionally for Deanston, we tend to fill all of our core product into bourbon casks, and most of them come from Kelvin Cooperage in Kentucky. And one of the reasons that we use Kelvin a lot is because it's two brothers from Glasgow who moved over to Kentucky, and they set up the cooperage. And as I said, Deanston used to be the cotton mill. It was the heart of the community, and we're still very, very big on that kind of community spirit and keeping things close to home. So at Deanston, it's all Scottish barley that we use. Everything's really locally sourced. So we like to use Kelvin because we've got that connection there, that Glasgow connection. When it comes to things like our muscat casks and our limited edition casks, we've got a few suppliers that we use for that. So we have a supplier over in France who actually supplies a lot of our casks like this. And we have an excellent relationship with a company called Alter Oak, and they supply a lot of the casks that we use for our limited editions. Just because it's again, we can go over there, we can visit their premises, we can have a look around, and that's what we like to do. We try and make trips to Jerez, trips to Kentucky, and actually see the suppliers, just so that we know exactly what we're getting.
Yeah, nice. It's kind of like the fashion industry in that way. You're like, I want to make sure that it's the best stuff and whatnot.
Absolutely, yeah. And I mean, they're absolutely beautiful places to go and visit, so I'm not complaining in any way.
God forbid. So this one's a 4-year finish. Is that kind of like typically how long you would finish for? Because you see some distilleries, like I think the Distillers Edition range is like 9 months finish or something like that, or like a year finish. So
Yeah, so it just totally depends on the cask type that we're using. So as I mentioned, Scotland's climate's not the warmest. If you have a really hot summer, things do tend to mature that little bit quicker. I would say typically when I'm thinking about finishing whiskies, I usually work to about the 2-year mark. Usually the 2 years gives you enough of an influence from the finishing cask without overpowering the wonderful characters that are already there. But it obviously just depends on the cask. So I felt with this one that it needed a little bit more. The muscat wasn't quite there. So that's why it got left for 4. But like you say, we do some quite kind of quirky things with Deanston because we can. So we've had it in stout casks before, for example. We've just had it in tequila casks, so we're ready to launch that. And those finishes have only been about 9 months. So when you use new casks that you're kind of experimenting with and that you've not used before, it's really just about constantly checking the whiskey to see how it's maturing, to see how it's finishing, and then making the call on when you think you've hit the sweet spot.
yeah, cool. Awesome. Now,
Okay.
I have a bit of a tangential question quickly. I hear there's a great tea shop attached to Deanston Distillery that makes fantastic Devonshire tea. I've heard rumors.
There is, so it's called the Coffee Bothy, and it's part of the distillery, but we don't actually own it. We've got a company who come in and run it, and it's just absolutely fantastic. So our sort of head office is in a wee place called East Kilbride, just outside Glasgow. So that's where we have a lot of our warehousing. That's where we bottle all of our spirit. That's where I've got a brand new kind of state-of-the-art blending facility. So I do spend a lot of my time there, but whenever I can make the excuse, oh, I need to go to Deanston to look at casks or to do some work, it's actually just because I want to go to the coffee bothy for a nice cup of tea and a scone. So yeah, it's great.
Awesome.
Well worth the visit.
Absolutely. I'd heard about it and I'm like, is this a thing? Is it real? You know, yep, excellent. It's on my to-do list.
You're welcome anytime.
Yep, excellent. All right, on to the 12-year-old. And again, guys, feel free to leave some whiskey in your glasses to go back to. We're gonna slowly go up ABV and peatiness. So, you know, we might find on second taste that something will strike you even more the next time around.
Yeah, so this is the 2008 Oloroso cask matured. So pretty kind of self-explanatory. It was distilled in 2008 and filled straight into the Oloroso casks, where it fully matured in these casks. So as you said, we're doing a lot at kind of higher ABVs. So this one's actually sitting at 52.7% ABV. What I would always say is taste it neat. But please feel free to drink your whiskey however you like. We obviously have seen a lot of kind of snobbery in the whiskey industry with the right and wrong ways to drink whiskey, but there absolutely is no right or wrong way. You work hard to earn your money to buy your bottles of whiskey, so you drink it however you enjoy it, whether that's neat, with some water, a cube of ice, even with a mixer. As long as you're enjoying it, I'll continue to make these whiskies for you to enjoy. So yeah, 52.7% ABV. But for me, it's so rounded that you don't actually get that alcohol coming through on the nose at all. On the nose, it's quite sweet. You're getting cherries, you're getting chocolate. For me, it's almost reminiscent of a Black Forest Gatto. But then you've got the wonderful spice in there that's coming from the Oloroso casks, a sweet spice, nutmeg, sultanas. Yeah, lovely spice in there.
Now, was this like a super wet Oloroso cask? Because when I drink it, I can like really feel the Oloroso. Sometimes, you know, you're like, oh, I get the flavors and the notes, but I'm like, damn, this is almost like a cocktail with Oloroso mixed in.
Yes, that's where we're really fortunate. Obviously, Distill aren't a huge company, so the volumes that we're making at each of our distilleries aren't absolutely massive. So because of that, it means that we have kind of wonderful teams who are very hands-on, and it means that we can obviously organise for our casks to come in, and when they come in, we fill them straight away. Because we're not huge, we obviously have quite a tight limited edition plan, and it just means that we can fill our casks as soon as they arrive on site, which is great because, as you say, that really preserves the wonderful flavours that are in the cask when they arrive at us. We don't want to leave them outside and for them to dry out. We want to fill them as soon as they arrive, which is great. So like you say, the Oloroso influence on this one is absolutely present. On the palate, you're getting a lot of the kind of dark fruits and festive spices that you would associate with Oloroso. There's treacle toffee in there, a touch of pine. For me, I actually get a very light hint of coffee coming through on the palate as well. Yeah, I love this one. I love the kind of lingering notes of gingerbread and nutmeg. It's quite a Christmassy whiskey, which is quite different for me when it comes to Deanston. So I always think of Deanston as being quite light and fresh with notes of like apples and pears and things like that. Whereas this one, I think just with it being in the Oloroso casks and that having such an influence in it, you're getting the kind of festive spice coming through, which is really, really nice.
Yeah,
awesome.
awesome.
And yeah, as I said, Deanston did used to be a cotton mill. So the old weaving shed where they used to weave the cotton, turns out that's a perfect environment for maturing whiskey. So because the temperature in there is so stable, so usually in warehouses, the bottom's a lot colder than the top, but there's only about half a degree of a temperature gradient across the warehouse at Deanston. So this wonderful whiskey was fully matured in the old weaving shed at Deanston, which makes it really special, and it gives it a really, really even maturation. And I think that's helped just impart the wonderful Oloroso flavours into this wonderful Deanston liquid.
Yeah, awesome. All right. Another little bit of a tangent here. Craig's got a great question, which I was kind of interested about. How's your scientific background? Because I was reading up, I think you started in wanting to do forensic sciences.
Yeah, that's right. So I had quite
Yeah.
an unconventional route into the whisky industry. So studied forensics at uni, and then I did a placement year between my third and fourth year where I worked for a whisky company, doing kind of analytical chemistry things with them in the lab. But I did a lot of the organoleptic there, and I suppose that's what kind of sparked my passion. So after I graduated, I went back and worked for the same whisky company in their grain distillery. So I learned all about grain distilling. And then when that closed down for the summer, I went up north and worked in their malt distilleries and learned about malt distilling. And yeah, I suppose that's what kind of sparked the passion. And then I moved over to distill as blender and was promoted to master blender in 2019. So it's been quite a kind of quick journey, but I think blending whiskey is it's a mixture of art and science. So you have to have that kind of creative flair, but having an analytical background as well. I think it just helps me build ratios and build up some of the blends and understand how some of the flavour compounds and different components will go together a little bit better. So yeah, I think the two do go hand in hand.
Yeah, awesome. And I think Craig as well was kind of like, how do you find that, your background is kind of received in the industry? I would imagine it's sort of like New World wine versus Old World wine. You've got the people who are like, you just know when the grape is right. And you're coming in a little bit more, scientific, analytical sort of stuff.
Yeah, so I think traditionally people would go to Heriot-Watt University that we have over here, and they would study brewing and distilling, and that's the kind of route a lot of people take in, whereas obviously mine was that little bit different. But I think with the number of awards that our whiskies are winning, I just got Master Blender of the Year for 2022. So I think people are actually opening their eyes and realising now that you can come from different backgrounds and have a different skill set and still apply it to Scotch whisky and make phenomenal products. So I think we are breaking down those old traditional barriers, and you're seeing kind of a new perspective when it comes to whisky.
Yeah, kind of a shutting down the haters with the all of the
Absolutely.
awards. Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, sweet. Awesome. Owen was asking, he got the coffee note on that Deanston as well. Is that a character you find in the spirit, or is it just something that comes out when you use fortified casks? Because I know when I think of Deanston, I say breakfast whiskey, the kind of fruits you would put on your muesli in the morning.
Yes, so Deanston for me, I get a lovely kind of light cereal note. I always get crisp green apples, like a apple you've literally just picked from the tree and bitten into it. That's what I get, real crisp apples. So no, it's not a note that I ever tend to get with Deanston, so it's quite unique that that's coming through in both of these.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely awesome. And such a great distillery, even though it is so relatively young. Obviously in Australia, it's like Deanston's well older than a lot of our distilleries, but yeah.
In terms of Scotch whisky, it's quite young, and obviously we're just about to come on to Bunnahabhain. I think everybody knows Bunnahabhain, and that's the one that people tend to shout about. And I think sometimes Deanston is almost like the little brother. It kind of sits in the shadow of Bunnahabhain, but the whiskey is so phenomenal that I will absolutely do everything I can to get Deanston on the map and get people shouting about Deanston, because the liquid is absolutely fantastic. And there's a Deanston expression for everybody, which is what I love.
Yeah. It's absolutely fantastic. And yeah, on that note, we might move across to some of the Bunnahabhains. And I will defer to you for the Gaelic names because I butcher them and I use my American accent as an excuse to butcher them.
Honestly, even with a Scottish accent, I still manage to butcher them. whenever we're doing tastings of our like new limited editions, and we've obviously given them these very unique names, it's always an argument about who's presenting which one, because everybody wants to just do 12-year-old because it's easy to say. So even among ourselves, we all argue about it. So do not worry about butchering the names. So yes, this is the Avanade, which we released this year for Fégile. So I know a lot of you will know about Fégile, but it's almost like the Glastonbury, but for whiskey. So it's a huge whiskey festival that happens on the island once a year, and each of the distilleries on the island have their own day. And we tend to do 3 special releases for it. So this was our kind of standard market release that we did this year. And as I said, as I'm talking, please feel free to get your nose into this. This one is sitting at 50.8% ABV. So as I said before, taste it neat, but please feel free to add water or anything if you like. So yeah, Avanade, that actually refers to the river, which supplies the water down to the distillery. So that's where we got the inspiration for the name. Bunnahabhain distillery is much older. Typically we use a lot of sherry casks. So when you talk about Islay, you think a lot about peated whiskies, and Bunnahabhain is unpeated. So predominantly what we produce at Bunnahabhain distillery is unpeated. It's unpeated, it's sherried, and it's just absolutely delicious. So a little bit of the story about this. Avanade, the heart of this is actually formed from these little PX octaves, which were maturing at the distillery. And the distillery manager there, Andrew Brown, who's just absolutely fantastic. He's been at the distillery for about 33 years, so there's nothing that man doesn't know, had pointed the octaves out and said, I've had a look at them and they look absolutely fantastic. I think they could be used for something. So our master distiller and myself, we had a look at them, and they were absolutely phenomenal. But as I said, what we want to do when we're using casks for maturation or finishing, we don't want to overpower the whiskey. And we felt with this that the PX had completely overpowered the usual notes that you would expect from Bunnahabhain. So it was almost too rich, too jammy. It was almost like people that taste wine talking colours, and we've started to use it a little bit in the whiskey industry. So if you think of the colour purple, it was almost full of plums and purple fruits and berries and things like that, but it was just too much. It was almost thick when it coated your mouth, almost like blackcurrant jam. So we decided to blend it with more traditional Bunnahabhain that was in Oloroso casks, and some Oloroso, some Bunnahabhain, in bourbon casks. And that was just to dial back some of the PX influence and showcase the wonderful character of Bunnahabhain. So you are on the nose getting the chocolate, the powdered ginger, the spice associated with Bunnahabhain coming through, but you've still got the wonderful sweetness in there. Still got the beautiful velvety rich texture. Initially it's like kind of creamy milk chocolate that I get, but then as that fades, you're getting sweet raisins, you're getting dried raspberries, all those kind of red and purple fruits that I was talking about. The PX is still there. I think when we tell people that there was PX octaves that formed the heart of this, people are almost expecting a PX explosion, and that's not at all what this whiskey is. The PX does develop. You get a little notes of the kind of balsamic vinegar, honeyed macadamia starting to come through, but it's all balanced with the notes that are always present in Bunnahabhain. So your kind of roasted almonds and spice, ginger, cinnamon, really spicy bursts of cinnamon on the finish there that's still lingering for me. As I said, this one is at 50.8. I'm being completely honest, I actually prefer this one with a couple of drops of water. I think it softens it a little bit, and I think it opens it up a little bit more and just lets some of the other characters really start to shine.
Yeah, it's got that I don't know if you've ever had like balsamic vinegar and raspberries together. It's got that like zingy, fruity, savory meld in. We've also got some amazing questions in chat, which is something that I was thinking about as well that we were definitely going to ask you. So obviously Moyne and Stoicia.
Yeah.
Obviously they're both peated Bunnahabhain. Is there kind of a naming convention for them? There's been some talk about, Moyne is obviously OB and Stoicia is more for independent bottlings and stuff. You tend to see it on independent bottlings. Is there kind of a, what's the sussing out there? Is there a ppm difference?
So it is the exact same spirit. So obviously, as you know, there's no secret in the whiskey industry that we all buy and sell and trade to make these wonderful blends. And we keep Monya for ourselves. That's obviously the peated expression, and we do launch Monya normally as limited editions, especially for like Fèis and stuff. And the Stoicia is just the Monya spirit that we rename for trading purposes. So the exact same spirit, but it's the stuff that we trade. We don't trade under our own name.
Okay, cool. Interesting.
Yeah, you hear a lot that Stoicia is the heavier peated version of Monya. That absolutely isn't true. They have the same ppm. We do make a heavily peated version at the distillery, but as of yet, we have not done anything with it. We made it as a special request for a customer, and we obviously kept some for ourselves, and it is wonderful liquid. But at Bunnahabhain just now, our focus is on the unpeated Bunnahabhain. So we're going to try and produce more of that and dial back the peated whiskey that we produce.
Okay, so what kind of, another great question is how much of each style is kind of made? What kind of percentage is the peated runs?
It was always a 50-50 split is how the distillery used to run, but we're slowly kind of changing those. So we'll be sitting about 70-30. And then, we'll just see how that balance tips. Obviously, we have some contracts that we need to fulfill. So as I said, we do trade the whiskey. But when it comes to what we do with the whiskey ourselves, we'll always do a peated expression for Fèis, but we won't be using the peated for our core as much. Our core is always going to be unpeated. So just for that reason, we will dial back on the amount of peated Bunnahabhain that we continue to produce.
Okay, cool. And correct me if I'm wrong, it was 1997 that the first peated Bunnahabhain was laid down since the 60s?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And yeah, what's lovely about peated Bunnahabhain as well is it's quite different. So as much as it's an island distillery and it's a peated whiskey, for me it's a little bit more gentle. There's almost a sweet peat there rather than the medicinal peat that you associate with island distilleries. So yeah, the Monya spirit is absolutely lovely. So it's not something that I would ever want to say goodbye to. I think we'll always produce a certain percentage of Monya, but yeah, it's lovely whiskey.
Yeah, it's awesome. It reminds me of peanut brittle.
Yes, it's really nutty. So the distillery manager there, Andrew Brown, that I mentioned, he never gets nuts on any Bunnahabhains. And on the 33 years that he's worked there, I think one expression he's got nuts in, which for me, it just blows my mind because every Bunnahabhain that I look at, whether it's Monya or unpeated Bunnahabhain, I get nut running through every single one, like you say, like the peanut brittle. So yeah,
absolutely. Like Owen says as well, Bunnahabhain's the only distillery that can do a 40-year-old exceptional unpeated sherry cask and then at the same time turn around and do a 5-year-old bourbon cask peated. That's both. I remember at Cadenhead's 4-year-old Bunnahabhain that was mind-blowingly good. It was amazing.
Yeah, Bunnahabhain special. It produces phenomenal liquid and it's great at all ages. That's why a lot of the things that we do don't have an age statement on the front because no matter what age the Bunnahabhain is, it is exceptional liquid.
Yeah. Well, speaking of age statement, maybe we should get on to the 12-year-old cask strength, which is relatively new, I suppose we'd say. We waited a long time on a ship for this whiskey to arrive in Australia. And but yeah, tell us a little bit more about how it came about.
Yeah, so cask strength, if you ever make the journey to Bunnahabhain Distillery, we have a warehouse where we set up tastings, and people get to taste the whiskey straight from the cask, and it brings people so much joy being able to do that. But we obviously understand that not everybody is able to make that trip. It's quite far away. It's quite a remote distillery. So it's the most northern distillery on the island, and it's a kind of single track road to get there, but it's well worth the drive and the effort to get there because it's beautiful. So what we wanted to do is try and share with people cask strength liquid for those who can't make that trip to the distillery. Not all whiskies actually work at cask strength. You've probably tried a few that you felt are maybe just a bit too spicy or a bit too overpowering. And not a lot of whiskies stand up to a full maturation in sherry casks, but 12-year-old really, at cask strength, it really intensifies the core characteristics of the spice, the cracked black pepper and cinnamon, but not at the expense of the whiskey's character. For me, it actually just enhances the character. It's still got the wonderful mouthfeel, the wonderful texture. And for me, it just showcases the balance of the spirit and the wood, but in a more concentrated form. So people obviously ask, is there a difference between 12-year-old cask strength and 12-year-old? But there absolutely is. So we don't bottle our 12-year-old cask strength at the exact same time we bottle 12-year-old. So it's not like it's one big batch that we take some off of and then we reduce down. We bottle the two of them independently of each other at different times of the year. So 12-year-old cask strength, the casks are hand selected. And as I said, the majority of it is fully matured in Oloroso sherry casks. And then there's a little small percentage of bourbon casks in there just to get the balance right. It's got big hits of chocolate, spice, concentrated dried fruits, lovely notes of toasted oak as well, which kind of go between sweet vanilla and cinnamon spice for me. So this is 55.1% ABV, so it is up there, it is high, but again, it just brings us back to, it gives you the option of drinking it however you like. And I just think this one at the 55% is absolutely phenomenal. You're getting the creamy chocolate on the palate, you're getting sherry soaked fruit, that wonderful nuttiness that we just spoke about there really coming through. And what I love about this is the kind of subtle sea spray that comes through. So a lot of our Bunnahabhain, we tend to mature on the island. So things for like 12-year-old, 18-year-old, and any age statement upward of that, we try and keep all the casks on the island to mature, because I just feel that it gives it this lovely coastal influence. It's a point of kind of great debate in the industry. So a lot of people will say that it's just tannins from the cask. Maybe I like to look at the kind of romanticized version, but I just think, obviously, we talk about the angel share where the casks are obviously breathing out. I feel like when they breathe back in, they're bringing in some of that coastal notes and you get a lovely salty sea spray. And for me, it really does come through on this cask strength whiskey.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think you can definitely tell when a distillery is based by the coastline, you know, that saltiness comes through. I mean, you know, you look at even here in Australia, like some of the Tassie distilleries that are a little bit more water facing, or you know, stuff like that. You can always taste where a whiskey's made from. I mean, otherwise, how would you get like Glen Grant and Capadonic being right next to each other and built exactly the same and tasting very different, you know? So yeah,
absolutely,
that's pretty awesome. Yeah, no, this is great. Daniel's asked a great question. Is there much work involved in keeping consistency with the 12-year-olds? Or, you know, does it vary year by year in kind of a way you can't really control?
Yeah, no, so there is obviously natural variation. So all of our whiskies are natural colour, unchill filtered. They're very, very natural products. And like you say, each year there'll be natural variation batch to batch, just through the casks being such natural things. We can't influence the maturation of these casks, but obviously what my job is to make sure that we keep it as consistent as possible. We've got a huge number of casks to choose from. So what we tend to do is we'll nose and taste a lot of the casks and just build them up one by one, so we get a blend that really matches the character that we're looking for. So yeah, it's definitely a challenge that we have, but that's kind of the main part of my job, is to keep the wonderful whiskies that we produce really consistent in character.
Yeah, fair enough. I've got another, this is a pretty big question from Craig, which is, with like the last few years of COVID and obviously the situation going on in Eastern Europe, you know, how's your production kind of been affected? Can we, you know, have you guys been able to hunker down and make more whiskey, or has it kind of been a little bit of a, oh, you know, weren't as able to lay down as much as we were last year and stuff?
No, we've been really fortunate. So with the distilleries, obviously they come under kind of food and beverage, which was deemed essential during the pandemic. So we were really fortunate that the distilleries only closed down for a couple of weeks, really. And then after that, we were back in full production. If anything, for us, what we are seeing is a huge increase in sales and a huge increase in demand, with obviously bars and pubs and restaurants being closed down. People are spending more time at home, so they're online, they're buying whiskey and they're enjoying it in the comfort of their own home. So our sales have actually increased. So with increased sales comes increased demand, and that we've actually used that as a justification to increase the production at our distilleries. So our distilleries weren't running at full capacity, but what we've done kind of since COVID's calmed down a little bit, we've increased the production at each of our distilleries, which is absolutely fantastic. So we don't plan on there being kind of any shortages. If anything, we're making more. The only thing that I would say for us that's been slightly affected is our cask supply. So getting your hands on casks these days is a lot more difficult than it used to be, but it's not impossible. So we are still able to get them. So no, don't expect any shortages from any of the whiskies that we make.
Awesome. I think the guys might have been a little bit worried if they needed to stock up to make sure that they weren't going to miss out.
Absolutely. No, we've been very fortunate that we've still been producing throughout.
Yeah, because I read somewhere that the wash still at Bunnahabhain was only operating at 47% capacity. Is that obviously a little bit more now?
Yeah, so I think probably by next year, I think you might see the 3 of our distilleries running at full capacity. So we have increased our master distiller, Brendan McCarran, who's fairly new into the role. He's been doing the role a year. He's came in with obviously like a kind of fresh set of eyes and big ideas, and he spent a lot of time at the distilleries, and he's a huge advocate for our whiskies. He absolutely loves them, and he really wants the distilleries running at full production, but without obviously having any impact on the wonderful flavors that we produce at the distillery, the new make spirit. So yeah, he's doing an absolutely fantastic job just now, and I do think by next year he'll probably have got his way, and you will see our distilleries running at full capacity, which is great.
Yeah, fantastic. Now, I think Owen's got a really important question, which is, when are the distilleries reopening for tours? He's visiting in October this year, so he's absolutely hankering to get there.
So I'm sure our distilleries, I know for Fegio, we didn't open for tours, which we used to do. But I think we are opening. So I know Deanston Distillery is definitely open for tours. They're obviously running reduced numbers and things like that. But we have the same manager across the board. So if we've opened Deanston, then I'm positive that Bunnahabhain will be back open for tours and things like that as well. So yeah, they absolutely should be open in October. But if you have any issues at all, please feel free just to drop me a message on Instagram or get my email address, and we'll make sure that when you visit that there's something for you to do at the distilleries if we're not able to run a tour.
Owen's thrilled, I can see. Awesome. All right. Well, let's move on to I think it's Anoch.
Unach.
Oh no, I'm never gonna get that.
Nope.
Forget about that.
To be honest, nobody would get it. We laugh all the time when we give them these names that we need to like when we're doing tastings, we write it the way that it sounds. Otherwise, we would forget, even when we're doing the tastings, and how you're actually meant to pronounce it. So yeah, this is Unach. So this is a 10-year-old from Bunnahabhain. And this is at 56.2% ABV. So again, we're still up there with the high 50s. So as I said, just to reiterate, drink it however you like. There's not an issue with that. So Unach's actually got a very kind of special place in my heart. So as I said, I was promoted to Master Distiller in 2019. And this was kind of one of the first expressions that I worked on. What Unach is, it's a marriage of port finished Bunnahabhain and sherry matured Bunnahabhain. So when I spoke to the teams about doing this and what the release was going to be, a lot of them said, oh, port and sherry, that's going to be a clash of character. I'm not really sure that's going to work. And I was like, no, please just leave it with me. Like, have faith in me, trust me, this will work. I've tried it and the flavors are phenomenal. So when I gave them samples and we did a tasting, they absolutely loved it. So Unach is actually Gaelic for union. And that's just obviously to reflect on the marriage of the port and the sherry that we've brought together for this. And yeah, I'm absolutely thrilled that I stuck to my guns and I wasn't put off by people saying that they thought it would be a clash in character, because for me, I don't think it is at all. I'm getting rich, creamy vanilla coming through. There's almost like brandy butter. There's caramel, there's berries, really subtle hint of oak, which I love. I like to smell oak in whiskey, but I don't like it to be overpowering. So I like that subtle hint that just comes through at the back. Sweet red and black fruits in this. So lots of berries coming through. And again, that cinnamon note that's just so reminiscent of Bunnahabhain to our house style. Roasted nuts for me still coming through. And that saltiness, the same saltiness that we got in the cask strength, I'm getting in this one as well. It's just a kind of gentle sea spray that comes right at the back.
Yeah, it's love that like Jammy Dodgers kind of with a sprinkle of sea salt. Yeah, this absolutely. Yeah, one of my favorites. I always like to, sometimes you drink a whiskey and it's just so transportational. And every time I sip this whiskey, I think I should be sitting in like a Chesterfield in an old library right now. Like that's what I feel like I need to be doing, drinking this whiskey. And obviously this is one of the limited releases, and that I think kind of goes into Daniel's question, which I saw was, is there any expressions or limited releases coming up that you're particularly excited about from Bunnahabhain? Because obviously this one is just awesome. So
yeah, so Bunnahabhain, as we said, obviously we tend to keep it in sherry cask a lot. That's our house style, particularly Oloroso sherry. But some of you might be aware of a limited edition that we did a while back, and it was a 1980 canasta. And it was absolutely phenomenal. The Bunnahabhain and canasta just went hand in hand. It was lovely. But obviously with it being a 1980, it was quite expensive. Not everybody could afford to buy it, which I fully understand. So without giving too much away, what I'd like to release in the future is a Bunnahabhain and canasta, but at a lower age, to make it more accessible, at a more accessible price point, so that a lot more people are able to buy it and enjoy it, because I think the canasta and Bunnahabhain, it's one of the most phenomenal whiskies that I've tasted. So that is definitely one. And the second one has to be Monya and Sauterne. So if you put Monya in any sort of sweet cask, I just think it works wonderfully. So Monya Sauterne, Monya Cadillac, things like that are the routes that I plan to go down with Bunnahabhain. So please look out for them, because hopefully they'll be coming very soon.
Yeah, awesome. Now I'm going to ask the question, because I'm not from a wine background or anything like that. Canasta, is a red wine cask or?
Canasta's sherry.
It is a style of sherry. Okay.
I'm
a style of sherry. So learning.
It stays true to our house style of being sherried, but it just gives Bunnahabhain a completely. It makes you look at Bunnahabhain from a new angle. So although it's sherried, the notes that it produces when you combine the two of them are absolutely phenomenal. So yeah, really excited about that.
Yeah, well, I'll put in an order for 3 bottles now as soon as that comes out. Well, shall we get on to the last one, which I'm sure most of the familiar faces in this chat know is one of my absolute favorites, ride or die whiskies. So the Ledaig 18, the actually peaty boy to finish us off.
Yeah, absolutely. So because this one is part of our core range, we do all of our core range as natural colour, unchill filtered, and 46.3% ABV. Because we're not chill filtering it, we obviously need to keep it above that kind of 43% ABV just to keep all those lovely oils in solution. We decided on 46.3 just because we felt like that was the sweet spot for our whiskies. It worked well across the three distilleries. And the 0.3, let's be honest, it's just a talking point. You can guarantee that whenever you do a tasting and you say 46.3, somebody says, why the 0.3? And as much as I would love to make up a huge big story and pretend that there was lots of science behind it, the truth is I think we just wanted to be a little bit different. So that's why we're kind of settled on 46.3. As you said, yeah, this is our peated expression. So Ledaig is distilled at Tobermory Distillery, which is the only whiskey distillery on the Isle of Mull. It's a beautiful, beautiful little distillery. And I always joke, Scottish people are known for being quite tight. We don't like to spend our money, and we expect good value for money. So Tobermory Distillery is probably the worst tour you could do as a Scotsman, because when you start at the beginning of the tour, you can actually see the end. That's how small our distillery is. But jokes aside, it is an absolutely beautiful distillery and well worth the visit. It's almost like we've taken everything that was made to create a huge distillery and squashed it into this tiny little distillery. So the stills are absolutely massive, but the room that they went into, it was almost like they couldn't fit. So the lie pipe on the still, it's almost like an S shape, which is really, really unique. But it's basically what we had to do to fit them in, and it creates this lovely, wonderful spirit. So at Tobermory Distillery, we produce two different spirits: Tobermory, which is our unpeated spirit, and Ledaig, which is our peated spirit. We used to split the distillery kind of 50-50 production wise, but Tobermory just doesn't really work at a young age. It's got quite a unique character. There's almost a sulphury note in there. And we just feel that it needs to spend quite a long time in cask to really showcase Tobermory for what it is, which is why we changed our 10-year-old to a 12-year-old, because it needed the extra 2 years. Ledaig, on the other hand, is phenomenal. Ledaig is phenomenal from the second it comes off the still, right up until any age. It's just beautiful. And I actually think that the younger the Ledaig is, the more peaty, the more powerful, and the bolder it is. But obviously today we're talking about the 18-year-old, which for me is just an absolutely phenomenal liquid. So the 18-year-old spends the first 16 years of its life in ex-bourbon casks before being finished for 2 years in sherry casks. So you're getting the fruitiness coming through. It's a kind of fruity, sherried smokiness that I get. Lovely balance of phenols. There's seaweed in there, dried chili flakes, spicy black pepper. And again, that kind of sweet oakiness that I'm getting coming through, which I think's the influence that's come from the bourbon casks that it spent 16 years in.
Yeah, it's one of my all-time favorites. I find that, especially for people who don't like peated whiskey, Ledaig is one where people were like, oh, it's not, like licking a campfire, like I chewed on a cigarette and stuff like that. And that was my experience starting out in peated whiskey drinking it. And but I always get this like smoked chantilly cream thing where it is that like
nice,
like not super sweet creamy, but there. Now Owen's asked an interesting question. Is there a rumor he heard about Tobermory maturing casks elsewhere than Mull, or obviously they'd be all matured on Mull nowadays?
No,
but,
so
apparently it might have been.
Yeah, if you ever visit the distillery, our warehouse there is absolutely tiny. So it doesn't hold a lot of casks at all. So we did leave quite a few casks in there. So for anybody who's seen our new kind of premium release for Tobermory, we're doing a series and it's like a 23-year-old, 24, 25. The casks for that are over on the islands, but other than that, everything comes back to the mainland. We just don't have the facility on Mull. As I said, we're so short for space. It's a tiny little distillery and we just can't mature everything that we would like to over there, sadly. So a lot of it comes back to the mainland and is matured here.
Okay, at Deanston or at another warehouse?
So we have warehouses just outside Glasgow where a lot of our Tobermory will go. So as I said, we built a brand new kind of state-of-the-art blending facility, and the spirit, Ledaig and Tobermory will come down there and it will be filled into cask, and we'll keep a lot of it on site there.
Yeah, awesome. All right, now Caleb's got a question that I know the answer to, which is he's heard of unpeated Ledaig bottlings. How does that happen?
So originally when Tobermory Distillery opened, it was actually called Ledaig Distillery, and it produced obviously two spirit. It actually produced unpeated spirit, but under the Ledaig name. So there's a lot of kind of confusion out there, because there is some bottlings that are unpeated that come from Ledaig. We're obviously trying to correct that and sort the confusion. So everything that we do peated at the distillery will always be Ledaig, and our unpeated will always be Tobermory. And the balance of this is going to split as well. So we were typically kind of 50-50 at Tobermory Distillery, but with Tobermory needing the longer kind of length of time to mature and really find its feet, we've decided that we're going to try and kind of tip the scales a little bit. So we'll produce much more Ledaig. So I think just now we're maybe sitting at about 70-30. But we're hoping to push that even more and maybe even go to kind of 80-20, 85-15, something like that. Because the volumes of Tobermory that we do, it's not as much as what we do with the Ledaig. And what we want to do is keep those volumes to mature and make Tobermory really, really premium. But with Ledaig, what we can do is for anybody who's tried our Sinclair series, which is a fairly new release from Ledaig, it's obviously a non-age statement. It's kind of younger ages of Ledaig that go into that, and it is phenomenal because Ledaig works well at younger ages. So we'll continue to produce high volumes of Ledaig and let you have it as soon as it turns 3, pretty much, because it's wonderful at that age.
Awesome. I always say to people, I'm like, I love Tobermory, but it's really an ends to a mean to get Ledaig for me.
Yes.
Awesome. Yeah. So, and as well, Caleb, pretty much I always kind of go by anything bottled before 1992 is like, who knows if it's peated or unpeated or anything like that. So I'm not sure how old the Thompson Brothers bottling that you're talking about is, but yeah, anything bottled before 1992 is a gamble, but a delicious gamble. So, so Daniel's asking, has Deanston ever done a peated expression? I feel like it was something that I've heard about briefly once.
No, so we don't do any peated whiskey at Deanston, but what we do, we produce 2 types of spirit there as well, but we do a Deanston organic, which is quite kind of unique. So we're actually organic certified, and what we do is when we close a distillery down for maintenance work and things like that, when we start back up, we start and we do a run of organic spirit. So yeah, it's quite unique, it's quite different. It's obviously all filled into either organic casks or virgin oak casks, and yeah, it's a little bit different, but no peated spirit from Deanston yet.
Any plans in the future for any, or maybe an experimental run?
Yeah, so I think we love experimenting. We'll always continue to do kind of experimental stuff. So I think at some point in the future, it's definitely something that we will look at. But obviously with our 2 other distilleries producing peated spirit, it's not something that we're focused on just now. I think our focus just now is getting Deanston on the map and getting people to shout about it.
Yeah, awesome. Now Craig has a really great question, which I've come back to. So if you just put the distill hat to the side for a minute, what distillery would you be, pouring into your glass every day? No availability or money as an object.
So I think because I spent so much time kind of up north doing the Speyside Whisky Trail, some of the little distilleries up there are just beautiful. So for me, I think it's got to be something like Strathisla. I love the distillery. It was one of the first distilleries that I visited. I think the whiskey that they produce is absolutely phenomenal. So yeah, something like a Strathisla for me, I think.
Yeah, I think they won like prettiest distillery or something. There was an award for
Yeah,
it.
I can see why. It's like picture perfect. It is, it's beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. And then putting the distill hat back on of all three, do you have one that you tend to go for more than the others, or in terms of drinking it, or do you have a favorite
So I
child essentially?
exactly, it literally is like picking between your children. But for me, I do think I have to back Deanston. So I think the reason for that is, as I said, there's a Deanston out there for everyone. So for anybody who doesn't know our kind of core range, we start with Deanston Virgin Oak, which is a non-age statement. Starts its life in bourbon, and then it's finished for kind of anything between 6 months and a year in virgin oak casks, just to add a little bit more to it, a nice kind of oakiness and coconut and things like that. And it is absolutely phenomenal. It's a whiskey that you can drink neat, no problem, but it works so well in cocktails like an old fashioned and things like that. But you've also at the other end of the scale got Deanston 18, which for me is just a phenomenal liquid. So yeah, I have to shout about Deanston because I think it's just absolutely wonderful.
Yeah, awesome. Fantastic. Well, does anyone else have any questions? Quickly pop them in the chat. I don't know how much time you've got left with us, but this has been absolutely fantastic. It's not every day we get to speak with a master blender. Normally it's a salesperson or a distiller, and I love distillers to bits, but they're like, yes, I make the liquid and then I put it in a barrel and magic happens, and you make
Yeah.
that magic into drinkable liquid. Awesome. All right. I think, Riley, are there more plans to be experimental with Bunnahabhain, Tobermory and Ledaig like you are with Deanston? Pretty good question.
I think Bunnahabhain, because it is a little bit more traditional, we need to kind of stay true to our roots. So for core range, you'll always see Bunnahabhain being in sherry casks. But I think for Fegio, what we'll do is our standard release, we'll try and do something with sherry just to stay true to who we are. But I do want to be quite expressive with and experimental with the other releases that we do. So I think Fegio will be the main ones where you'll see Bunnahabhain maybe being a little bit more quirky. Tobermory, because we're trying to make it that little bit more premium, we will be experimental, but it'll be more kind of premium casks that we use. And Ledaig, absolutely. Again, Ledaig lends itself so well to lots of casks, whether it's rum, sherry, brandy. It works well with everything. So absolutely, I think we'll put Ledaig into a range of different casks and just see where we get to.
Yeah, fantastic. Awesome. All right. Now I'm going to put up a poll for everyone to let us know what your favorite whiskey of the night was. I know which one I would vote for, always Ledaig, but I have to see what everyone else thinks. Got another good question. If you could pick any cask in the world to age whiskey in, what would it be? Like your dream cask to get your hands on?
So I think there's a couple of answers to this. There's a few like really premium old sherry casks that I think I would like to be able to get my hands on. But if you go the other side of the scale, so I don't even know if you have it in Australia, but there's a drink over here called Buckfast. And it's known for like people that are a little bit maybe people that are a bit more wild drink it before a night out. But I just think with something like Deanston, I think if you finished Deanston in a Buckfast cask, I think it would work well. I think it would be quirky and different. And honestly, I would just absolutely love to do it. Not sure how the company would feel about it and how they would market that, but it's something that I would love to do.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. I worked with an Irish woman for a while, so I know all about Buckfast. obviously everyone in the chat is absolutely loving the idea. Just like have a cask and just hide it in the warehouse and nobody needs to know. Just like let it sit there.
Exactly.
Yeah,
I think it would work well.
yeah. Josh is happy to pre-order a bottle to show the demand. I absolutely love that. Yeah, no, it's there's so many insane casks that like, you know, we're already not even using. I went to visit family in Greece and I found out about a semi-sweet red wine called Mavro Daphne. And I'm like, why are we getting our hands on these casks? Anytime I see a wine cask, I'm like, can I put whiskey in it?
I know. I love whiskey, especially in sweet wine casks. I think it works so well, especially peated whiskies.
Yeah.
So yeah, lovely.
Yeah. I think we're starting to see a surge in people understanding that peat and sherry are the best of friends. One of my favorite whiskeys of all time was an 18-year-old Ledaig in PX sherry cask.
PX, yep.
So good.
Ledaig and PX and Monya and PX, they just work. We did I think it's a 2004 Monya PX, and honestly, like people still talk about it. It just works so well.
Yeah. It's a good question from Scott and Sandy. Does the rugged ship steering helmsman on the Bunnahabhain label have a name? Is there a colloquial name in the company for him or nameless?
No, actually, now that you say it, I don't think he does. I don't think we refer to him as anything. So we just obviously referred to him as the helmsman. But I don't think he actually has a name, I'm afraid. But that's maybe something that we should work on for the future.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure you might have seen there's what's his name? The guy from the Spider-Man movie, and it's him in a captain's hat as the Bunnahabhain, looking just like the Bunnahabhain ship captain. It's such a funny little thing. But yeah, and one Daniel's offered that he hears Daniel is a popular name for helmsman.
I'll take a note of that, don't worry.
Yeah, and another thing I know, a lot of distilleries name their stills. Is that something that you guys have? You have names for all your stills, or too many to?
So at Tobermory Distillery, we produce a gin as well, Tobermory gin, and our stills there, it was Betty. So we had wee Betty and big Betty. But apart from that, I'm sure the distillery managers have several names for their stills, which I probably wouldn't be allowed to say, given how old obviously a lot of our stills are. But no, it's not something that I tend to refer to.
Yeah, fantastic. All right, well, I might put the poll results up, and Ledaig 18-year-old just beats out the Bunnahabhain limited edition. I'm not going to say the word because I'm going to mess it up again. Yeah, I've been trying to use the mnemonic. It's like an ouch because you need a whiskey for your ouchie.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like we do try and make it easy for people to say, but unless you've got a kind of Scottish accent, how you pronounce like CH is different to how we would pronounce it. So yeah, it's very difficult.
Yeah. No, amazing. Well, thank you so much for lending us your time and being a part of this fantastic tasting with all of these distilleries. I'm sure everyone's enjoyed everything. But yeah, we'll be popping the video link up for this tasting online very soon. But otherwise, enjoy the rest of your nights. Enjoy, I'm sure Julieann's got work to do probably with the time differences. Got to get back to the grind. So yeah, thank you so much everyone for popping along and making this such a spectacular tasting, our biggest of the year. So yeah, and if you guys are after any bottles, up on the Whisky List website, it should show the retailers that we have that still have stock of some of these bottles. Some of them are running out. But yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much again. And I'll catch all you guys in the next virtual tasting.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Anytime. Literally anytime. You're welcome back. You've You've been fantastic.
Thank you.